Today we are comparing the iPhone XR versus the Samsung S10e, and let's figure out which one has the better camera. They both cost about the same price, and there's a lot more value with the Samsung from the start. So right now the iPhone is recording in 1080p, and on the Samsung we are shooting in 4K, so that's one huge step over the iPhone right now. Another feature the Samsung does have over the iPhone is the ultra wide lens. I'm so glad that they included this, so we're gonna test that out as well. Let me know if you can see a difference between 4K versus 1080p. I can't tell right now, so let me know down below. To give you a better view, I'm switching it to landscape mode so you guys can actually see it with the full screen. This is a low light test of the front facing camera. I am interested in seeing how well the 4K is doing in low light situations. Starting off with the front facing portrait mode, one problem I've already seen right now is the strong flare or the sun flare that's showing on the Galaxy S10e, which makes the overall image a bit softer and a little bit washed out. So if you take the picture away from the sun or under the shade, then you should be fine. I want to point out that on the iPhone, the portrait mode really focuses on the face, so if you look at the zippers, it starts to blur out. Whereas on the Galaxy S10e, it's a big cutout on my whole body, so it really separates from my body versus the background. Alright, going to the back camera, the portrait mode on the iPhone XR, the image is more flat obviously than the Galaxy S10e. So the Samsung has more contrast, is more punchier, the shadow sticks out more, so a lot of people would probably go towards the Samsung image over the XR, but that's just my thought. So here's another image of me, and I think my skin tone looks a bit too greenish on the Samsung, but I still gotta go with the Samsung because the colors of my jacket, sweater, and my bag really looks like that in real life. Here's something that's pretty obvious from the iPhone camera app. You can't really do portrait mode on any objects, so you really need to have a face for that to activate. On a Samsung, you can do it on basically anything. And the Samsung do have two other options, or three actually, spin and zoom, which is something I think people will use less, but something I think people would use a lot more is the color pop effect. I want to show you first that it doesn't work on everything and it doesn't work perfectly on everything, so I just want to show you some messed up pictures of how the effect look like. Now if it's a simple object or simple shape, then it should work most of the time. It does a good job on human subjects, whether it's a full body shot or even a more close-up shot. If your subject is pretty far away, it won't really work. Or complex poses. As you can tell, the bar is still green and the strip next to the foot is still yellow. Now going to the main back camera, I want to point out that the quality and sharpness is really identical to each other, so there's not really a big debate who's a big winner there, but in terms of color and how they reproduce it, that's really personal preference. So here is basically the main point, or I'm just going to show you pictures of both and you guys can decide which one you like better. And I also want to mention that sometimes they're not consistent. Sometimes the XR will do better in highlights and shadows, and sometimes the S10e will do better in shadows and highlights. So it's kind of a hit or miss. One thing I do notice about the XR is that when you're shooting in snowy situations, the color tends to shift more towards the blue side, especially in the shadows. If you take a look at the building on an XR picture, it's more bluish, whereas on a Samsung, you can tell that the yellow is still popping out, the dark greens are still there, and it looks like how it should look like in real life. To me, I think the Samsung holds the sun a little bit better and the sky creates a bit more gradients, whereas on the XR, the sky looks completely flat. I think it's safe to say you can go with the Galaxy if you like a more contrasty, punchier look, or just something that's ready to be shared on social media. And of course, the ultra wide lens. If you love using this lens or you haven't yet, really try it because it really changes your mind on how to take pictures, and it really changes the perspective in your pictures as well. Hands down, this is my favorite feature on the Samsung Galaxy S10e. So moving to low light photography, the XR will obviously be a little bit more brighter because of that known flat look. So the blacks or shadows on a Samsung will be a bit more darker or more harsh. And again, the quality on these phones are both really good, so it really all comes down to you. Now the ultra wide angle on the Samsung doesn't perform as well as the main back camera. The overall picture is not as sharp, although you do get that nice angle, but you will see a lot more green artifacts or even more noise crawling from the side or corners of the pictures. So I wouldn't suggest shooting with the ultra wide angle during low light. Here's the 4K 30 stabilization test, and from what I'm seeing, the iPhone is just a little bit more natural looking. It does have some sort of jitteriness from the hard steps I'm taking, and as you can tell, I'm walking on snow and slush, so it's not the most stable thing. And on the Samsung, it's I would say it's a bit more artificial looking, it's a bit more electronic. It does sometimes jerk a little bit, that gives off that electronic vibe. I mentioned before, taking pictures in snowy situations, the iPhone XR is more bluish, same with the video, and on a Samsung, the tree is clearly brown, just like how I'm seeing it in real life. And I'm shooting it in auto, I'm not changing no settings, I'm just hitting the record button and that's it. Here's the 4K 30 stabilization test on the XR versus the Samsung XSE ultra wide lens. And the stabilization on the S10e in this lens is way better than the XR. And I think the ultra wide angle lens stabilization is better than the main lens on the Samsung. You don't see any jitter or jerkiness on the stabilization. And if you guys don't know, if you're using super steady mode, it also uses this camera as well. Here's 4K 60, obviously it doesn't have any stabilization, so in terms of quality, they should be the same or they look the same. Obviously the only difference is the color temperature, which I do like on a Samsung more because you can actually see the warmth on the floor, whereas on the XR it looks much more blue. On a Samsung you can actually switch to ultra wide mode and back to regular while you're recording. So you don't have to stop, switch angles and then hit record, you can just do it all in one take. So it's a bit more convenient, especially when you don't want to miss the moment. So here's the super steady mode and it's only shooting in 1080 max. I would say the stabilization is better. I wouldn't say it's amazingly better if you're just walking, but if you're running and if you're doing action sports, then that's when you see the biggest difference. And it does get rid of those vibrations and micro jitters every time you make a heavy step. I am planning to vlog only using the super steady mode and compare it with the GoPro 7 Black. So stay tuned for that. So mostly I won't be using this mode for everyday occasions, but it is really handy to have. Now we're still in super steady mode and as you can tell right away, the quality of the super steady mode really degraded very quickly. The low light performance is not the best, just going indoors really takes a toll on the quality. And of course, going outside in the dark wouldn't be any better. You can really see the electronic stabilization working on a Samsung. I would not recommend using this mode when you're indoors or in any low light situations. As you can tell in this clip, everything is blurry, the sharpness is already gone, and there's so much noise. Here is the low light 4K 30 stabilization test. I can tell you right now, the iPhone wins right away. You can clearly see the micro jitters on a Samsung, and if you look up in the sky, there's so much more noise on the S10e than the iPhone XR. And the buildings are pretty much overexposed on a Samsung as well, whereas on the iPhone, it really kept controlled. You can actually see through the building or in the building. And the floor also has that green tone going on, which is pretty common in a lot more mid-tier or cheaper phones. So for low light video, I would recommend turning off video stabilization. And since 4K 60 does not have stabilization, this is what it will kind of look like when you turn off video stabilization in 4K 30. So for this example, since there's no stabilization on both of these, the image quality is pretty close to each other. I would say that the Samsung still have that like green tint on its overall image, and obviously it has that contrast look versus the iPhone XR. Also, Samsung does give you this best shot suggestion, which does help a little bit, but it doesn't really come up as often as I would like. So that was my comparison between the XR versus the Samsung S10e, which you can both get for the same price. If you get any questions, put them down below, and also let me know which one would you prefer. I have links down below if you want to check these products out or even all the gear that I use. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.